Hello everyone and welcome to the West Virginia Press Association's session number 4, today's West Virginia Supreme Court. Thank you for being at Convention 2019. I'm Don Smith, Executive Director of the West Virginia Press Association, and we're very glad you're here. We are honored to have our justices with us today. But as we get started, I do want to thank all the other people who make this convention possible, our sponsors, and our network of friends: AARP West Virginia University, University Relations, Milan, Encova Insurance, Highmark West Virginia, IOGA of West Virginia, the West Virginia Tourism Office, Wonga, Appalachian Power, the West Virginia Bar Association, Tech Connect West Virginia, Huntington Bank, the Asher Agency, the Barnes Agency, the Contractors Association of West Virginia, HepCat Design for our graphics and program, Everywhere Local for our live streaming and video, and the West Virginia Press Association Foundation, who is our long-term supporter of educational programs of this type. Let's begin, and I do want to make sure you're aware to the reporters in the room and all of our guests that this is being live streamed also. It will be available for reviewing and rebroadcast from our website and Facebook page, and we welcome our live stream audience. Today's West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals, we will have Chief Justice Beth Walker and the Justices of the Supreme Court of Appeals, Tim Armstead, Evan Jenkins, John Hutchinson, discuss the operation and future of the Supreme Court. We also want to thank Justice Margaret Workman, who had a previous scheduled commitment and did try to rearrange her schedule up to the last minute, but she won't be able to make it today. This panel is occurring for two reasons. During the last year, it became clear to us that the Supreme Court was operating in a new manner. It wasn't just that the media was watching more closely of court activities, but it was clear the operations were changing. And this session is one example. Today's court is more accessible to the media and the public than any time I can recall in my 35 years as a journalist in West Virginia. When we reached out to the court about the possibility of this session, I thought it would be invaluable to our reporters and our newspapers and the people of West Virginia. But I'll be honest, I didn't know if it was possible. Not only was it possible, but in sitting down and discussing this with Chief Justice Walker and Justice Armstead, I found it also fit into all the justices' goals for the future of the West Virginia Supreme Court. So again, we're honored to have them here and to look at the new court and operations moving forward. I will do a brief introduction and then we will move forward on the topics. I'll let each justice introduce. In the program there are longer introductions, you can look at those. I'll let each justice talk, but we did agree to talk about 4 general topics. Chief Justice Walker will give us a brief overview of the court and their openness initiative. Justice Armstead will talk about the budgeting process that the court now uses. And the order of this could change, but I think the justices, we are pretty much certain this is the way we'll go. Justice Jenkins will discuss the court's website and the media access that's available there and the public access that's available through using that. And Justice Hutchinson will talk about the caseload and the demands on the court. In closing, we'll see if there are some questions that they can answer, with the understanding that some topics aren't available for conversation. They can't comment on some things, and if we find that out, we'll see. With that, I will turn the mic over to Chief Justice Walker. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And all of us are very grateful for the opportunity to be here today and to speak to not only everyone in the room here in Morgantown, but anyone who might not be out enjoying the beautiful sunshine and might be sitting and watching the Facebook live feed. But we're glad you're here. Wherever you are. And the fact that all 4 of us are here, and certainly Justice Workman would have been here if she could have been, is really indicative of how we've been working. We have been working as a team this year. We had a lot to do, and there's still plenty of work to be done, but it's been very much a team effort. And so I thank my colleagues for going in on this effort today and being here. So I'm going to start with a little overview. And then we'll get on to the other topics. Of course, that's the new court, as we like to call ourselves, because, of course, with Justice Hutchinson joining us in January, we were back to a full 5-member court. 3 of whom are relatively new. I'm going to skip around on the slides a little bit. For those of you sort of keeping score at home, this is the list of the justices and when our terms end. You're stuck with me until December 31 of 2028, God willing. And but you'll see that I've put asterisks on 3 of the justices. It's important to know, as much transition as we've had, there will be 3 seats on the court, on the ballot in May of next year. And the seats that will be on the ballot, they'll be running in divisions. Each division will have a number. Those divisions and the person who's currently in that seat are the ones with the asterisks. So of course, Justice Workman's seat will be on the ballot. Justice Armstead, who is completing a prior term and is running for a 12-year term, and Justice Hutchinson, who's actually running in a special election because he was appointed after the last general. You know how all of that goes with appointments. So I just wanted everybody to kind of have the lay of the land of who's who. And we can certainly answer any questions you have about the election process. But going back to my primary goal here today, this is a little pyramid that I know is hard to read, but it kind of explains the 4 main parts of the West Virginia judiciary. Of course, the magistrate courts, we have 155, I think, 58 magistrates in 55 counties, and they serve for 4-year terms. That's the bottom of the pyramid. That's really the part of the judiciary that more people than anyone else see. They handle most misdemeanor proceedings. They handle domestic violence, petition orders. They at the preliminary stages, they do some preliminary work with felonies. About 2/3 of the work of the magistrates is in the criminal area. It's very busy. They work really hard. The next step up are the family courts. We have 47 family court judges in 27 circuits, and I'll show you a map of that in a minute. Family court judges serve 8-year terms, and family courts handle pretty much all domestic matters, divorce, child custody, other than abuse and neglect proceedings. And I'm sure you know, but abuse and neglect proceedings are the civil process. It's not a criminal, it's a civil process, whereby if a child is being abused or neglected by the person responsible for them, parent or guardian, then there is a process for dealing with that situation that unfortunately and tragically right now very often results in the removal of those children from the parent's custody. But those are not handled in family courts. Those are handled by the circuit courts, which are the next line up on the pyramid. Our colleague Justice Hutchinson is a veteran of the circuit court. He served over 20 years in Raleigh County. There are 75 circuit judges and 31 circuits. The circuit judges also serve 8-year terms. And then at the top, just because we are the court of last resort in West Virginia, is the Supreme Court, 5 justices, and we serve 12-year terms. So that's just a little overview. This is a new pyramid that we've actually put in our new brochure, which I'm not sure if we brought them, Jennifer, maybe not, but we can certainly make them available, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the judicial branch is more than just the courts. We actually have, and I used this slide when we went over to the legislature in January and did a little Courts 101 session. And so if you know this already, I may be repeating myself, but not everyone has the opportunity to know that the judicial branch, the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals, employs almost 1,500 folks all across the state. And the largest group of employment you'll see in there, this is as of the end of fiscal 19, we just updated these numbers, are the magistrate courts. We have more people working in magistrate courts than in any other part of the judiciary, at almost 500 people. The next one may also surprise you. You may or may not know, we are in charge of probation in the state. That's not parole, that's corrections. This is probation. So all the probation officers all across the state work for the Supreme Court of Appeals, and we have a probation division. That's part of the administrative side of our work. And almost 400 people work in probation. And of course, then you'll see the other numbers. So the vast majority of the people who work for the Supreme Court of Appeals are actually all around the state, working in the magistrate courts, the circuit courts, the family courts, and also in probation. Of course, we also have some specialty courts that you've probably heard about. Our treatment courts, you've probably heard about our drug courts. You've probably, I hope you've heard, you're going to hear more about our family treatment courts, which will be a brand new, we're going to roll them out in September, opportunity to work with families in abuse and neglect cases, which I told you about a little bit ago, to provide some treatment options in that context to maybe help those parents be able to rehabilitate and regain custody of their children. So we're getting ready to kick off again veterans courts, which are focused toward the needs, particularly mental health needs, of veterans who may find themselves involved in our criminal justice system. So we have a lot of different treatment courts. We have a mass litigation panel, which is a highly specialized group of circuit judges who handle very large cases. And then we have our business court, which is another group of circuit judges who adjudicate business disputes. But those three courts off to the side, the treatment courts, are all staffed by our 1,500 people. We don't have extra people, save maybe one law clerk who works exclusively for, they all have other jobs. In other words, our circuit judges may also be drug court judges. They may also serve on the mass litigation panel. So we certainly try to use all of our human resources wisely in serving West Virginia. Looking at, this is just a quick map. I told you we have circuit courts. We have the contiguous same color counties are in the same judicial circuit. We have some circuits like Kanawha, which is a single county circuit. We have other circuits like the Eastern Panhandle, which is a 3-county circuit. Each of those circuits has a chief judge and one or more judges who probably in the multi-county circuits serve in different locations. So when you hear us talk about the circuits, that's what that means. And then the family courts are divided similarly into family court circuits. This all predated my arrival at the court. I'm not sure why we have different circuits for family courts and circuit courts, but I'm sure there's a very good explanation having to do with the workload and making sure that, but it is a little bit confusing. So if you hear that there's the 26th judicial circuit for circuits might be different for family. It's all on the website, which Justice Jenkins is going to tell you about here in a little bit. So that's kind of Courts 101. I hope a little bit of education, and I want to close my little part of the program by talking about the very important work that I've been calling our Transparency and Accountability Initiative. And in preparing for this presentation and in thinking about all the work we've done in the past several months, our work has really fallen into 3 main categories. And so I'm going to talk about each. The first, of course, is repairing and establishing good relationships with the other 2 branches of government. Obviously, over the events that in the year that was not awesome, as I call it, there was a lot of repair to be done and a lot of trust that needed to be regained. So we focused right from the beginning of the year on working with the legislature, doing the Courts 101 presentation, making ourselves available for questions and as resources as they work through legislation that might affect the courts or that the courts might have some input on. Our main emphasis is what Justice Armstead is going to talk about, of course, was our budget, but we worked really, really hard on making sure that our budget was not only responsible, but that we could explain it and that we can answer all the questions and that we were as transparent as possible. We were told by members of the finance committees that we provided much more information about the judiciary than some other state agencies have ever provided them. And so we were very excited about that. We also sharpened our pencils and looked at our budget and tried to be as responsible as we could. And we were very excited. We got some nice, this is a big font for a newspaper, but I thought you'd appreciate it. This is thanks to the Wheeling Intelligencer. State's highest court seeks lower budget. And that's because we decided, so thanks for the big font. That's like Nixon resigns font. I mean, that's a big font. We appreciate it. But it was a big deal, and we took it really seriously. And you'll hear more about the budget. I don't want to step on what Justice Armstead's going to tell you about. But we also worked really closely with the state auditor and really opening up a lot of conversations about the ways the state auditor could help us as we were working on all of these transparency and accountability initiatives. So that was part one, reaching out, working with the other two branches of government, repairing maybe some damaged relationships. Part two, policies, policies, policies. One of the problems that resulted in all of what happened was the lack of policy. You know, that we didn't have financial policies, we didn't have IT policies, we frankly hardly had any policies at all. It was a little shocking when I got there, and I soon learned that there was a reason, because I guess folks didn't want to be accountable, but now we are. And so one of the first things we did, again, helping with great help with the state auditor, we have a fabulous CFO, is we put together our financial policies. We have policies on procurement now. You can't just go out and buy a $32,000 couch. You'll be glad to know. We have policies that there are a lot more checks and balances than there used to be. We have our P-card policies, making sure that we align with the rest of state government in the purchasing card, P-cards, and that we're doing things consistently with other branches. We have a policy on general accounting policies. Just making sure that everything is, you know, we have rules and we're going to follow them. Our travel policy, you can no longer take a state car and just do whatever you want and drive anywhere you want. In fact, we've prohibited the use of state cars for personal reasons, and you know, we only have a fleet of 17 state cars in the entire judiciary, but you can be sure that we have a very different approach to using them. We no longer have cars, for example, that are available exclusively for the justices. They're all in a pool, they're available. You know, our folks do have to travel statewide quite often. You know, our public information folks like Jennifer, who come with us when we go around the state, you know, the travel is necessary, and using a car is an economical way to do it as opposed to mileage, but now we have rules in place about that. So policies, policies, policies. Justice Jenkins, I'm sure, will show you, or I hope he will, all of our policies we've been putting on our website so that people can see these are our policies. We not just are talking about them, we're using them, and they're available for everybody to see. And then the last piece of our kind of transparency and accountability initiatives this year has been education and outreach. I firmly believe that any time a public official just stays in their office, stays in the Capitol in Charleston, doesn't get out, doesn't talk to taxpayers, doesn't talk to the media, that they become isolated, and I think some of that happened. And I will tell you that our approach this year has been quite the opposite. We have been out a lot. I was thinking about getting t-shirts printed up, actually, the Transparency and Accountability Tour 2019, like list all the cities on the back. We haven't done it yet, we're still thinking about it. But it's been very deliberate on our part. I mean, we've been to all of the education conferences for the circuit clerks, for the magistrates, for all of our abuse and neglect trainings across the state. And just talking to people about what's going on, you know, what's happening, what are your, you know, are you having concerns about anything? Lots of communication, and it's really benefited us at all levels. Justice Hutchinson, I give him special credit because he has really been engaged, and Justice Armstead, with the circuit clerks and working on our e-filing initiatives and making sure that that's being done in a responsible way going forward. So as it turns out, you learn a lot when you go out and you talk and you listen to what people's concerns are. We've also, we're going to ramp up our schools program again, but I can tell you that the folks at this table have been out talking to school, you know, classes in communities, just kind of explaining what the courts do, teaching, you know, just trying to have a little bit of outreach. And then the last thing, I'm very excited about our 2 video projects, which we've announced in the last couple of months. The first was it's a 4-part video on our domestic violence protective order process. And it's a very basic explanation of what that process is if someone feels that they're in danger, how they can get a domestic violence protective order. It explains the other side of that is, you know, if you're accused of committing domestic violence, what are your rights? And it goes through that whole process in a very easy to understand way. And we just thought it was important that those tools be available. Everybody goes to YouTube now. You know, if some breaks in my house, one of the first things I do is go on YouTube and figure out how to fix it. And so we thought, well, we'll put them on our YouTube channel and make them available to all the domestic violence you know, folks who work in that area, and we're hoping that it helps educate them about their rights, and we're hoping to do more of that. The other video project that is new, that we just put out, I guess last week or the week before, is we've revamped our videos about the judiciary. We had them, they were on CDs. I said, well, let's update them. Let's make them timeless. Take all of there were some justices who were in the videos. We said, let's make these so we don't have to redo them every time we have new justices, and let's put them on our YouTube channel. So they're there now. There's a great one about our courtroom, our beautiful courtroom in Charleston, designed by Cass Gilbert, and the others are explaining, you know, what the courts do. So I encourage everybody to check those out. As I said, and I'll use this kind of to close, there's a contrast now between the new court and the former court. This is the brochure of the former court. It always had pictures of the justices and had a lot of biographical material. This is the brochure of the new court, which features the courtroom. And we are focused on re-earning the trust of everyone in West Virginia and the integrity of our judicial system. We're working hard on it, and I'm pleased to say that the 5 of us working on it and working as a team have come a long way in the last few months. And with that, I think I'll finish my slide, and I will turn this over to my colleague, Justice Armstead, who is the budget geek of the group.
And the brochure is online. It's on our publications page.
Okay.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Before I start, I guess I got to tell you, and I always give him a hard time when I'm at these meetings, but I had the honor of being a part of you for a little while. I was a journalist, I guess you would say. I don't know if I was officially one, but I worked for the Braxton Citizens News for a while, and Ed and Janine are here in the front row to make sure that I stay in line here. So great to see you all, and it was really an honor to be a part of it. But you know, I think it gave me a good insight to journalism and how you go about covering the news of our state. And I just want to say I was honored to do that, and I appreciate the role that you play. And I do think that we understand that as we try to rebuild the reputation of the court and we try to move forward, that you are an important part of that, because the more open and transparent we are, that will only get to the people of West Virginia through you. And so we appreciate your role in getting news out and holding us accountable. And we recognize that, and I think all this court are very happy to be held accountable, because we're trying to do the right thing to get our court back on course. So one of those things that I think is very important in terms of the accountability and the transparency of the court is how we go about spending the taxpayers' money. That is one of the most important things to the people of West Virginia, is they do not want to see waste. They do not want to see abuses of their taxpayer dollar, and rightfully so. And I had the privilege to serve in the legislature for 20 years, work on 20 state budgets, and in that time, every time that we had our state budget, we had no oversight whatsoever really over the Supreme Court budget. They would give the number, the bottom line number, to the governor. It would be placed in his budget, and we could ask questions about it, but we couldn't do anything about it. If we felt like there was a part of it that was overspending, there wasn't anything we could do about it. We could only increase it under our Constitution. We could not decrease it. We could not change it. And so, as you know, in the 2018 election, there was a very important piece of legislation that we passed in my last year as Speaker that placed on the ballot a constitutional amendment that changed that and allowed the legislature to have oversight over the court's budget. And we as a court, once we became the new court, as the Chief Justice has said, we took an action and a vote, and a majority of the court said we supported that. And so I think that's very important to know. We are on board. This is not a legislature versus the court, or certainly not the people versus the court. We are on board, and we want that accountability. We want that transparency in our budget, and we are fully on board with that amendment and implementing that amendment. And the one thing I wanted to talk about for a few minutes today is, how do I do this?
It's,
Just do the middle one.
No, the left or the right.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's good, yes. I won't go and read that, but this is sort of the summary of the Judicial Budget Oversight Amendment. And the high points, as you probably know, are the court's budget is subject to review by the legislature. The court's budget will be taken apart basically by the legislature, and they will be able to make modifications to that budget. And I'll talk about a little bit about the specifics of that. But that amendment has not kicked in until next year's budget. But we wanted to go ahead and start that process this year. And so we, I think, had a very good discussion with the legislature, a good relationship with the legislature. As the chief has said, she went and did a tremendous job of explaining our budget, how we go about spending taxpayers' dollars in the court system to the legislature and answering questions. But the constitutional amendment actually requires the Supreme Court to go before the legislature and defend its budget, so to speak, or to explain its budget. And it also allows that oversight that we talked about. But there's one important caveat to it that I want to, right there, let's see.
Yeah.
If you look at the highlighted part there, it says, provided that the legislature may not decrease the total general revenue appropriations to the judiciary in the budget bill to an amount that is less than 85% of the amount of the total general revenue appropriation to the judiciary in the most recently enacted budget, without a separate vote of the legislature by 2/3 vote. So in other words, there was some concern back at the time this was passed that, well, what if the legislature doesn't like something that the court does and they just decide to zero out the budget? Would there be any checks and balances there? And so the legislature put into that provision that the most that it could basically reduce a budget was 15% from the previous budget. So there is a safeguard there, but they would still have that ability to even go to a larger decrease if they had 2/3 vote of the legislature. So there are safeguards that protect both the legislative ability to oversee the budget and the court's ability to have its independence as well. So I think there's a balance there that's now in the Constitution of the state of West Virginia, and there's accountability for our budget. And what I would like to touch on is sort of what did we do in our past budget this year. The first thing we did, and I'm going to show you this is, you might be surprised that in the budget bill itself, which is usually more than 200 pages of line items, those of you who have tried to pour through it from time to time know that, you might be surprised that the entire judicial branch of government is 11 lines in that budget. 11 lines. Everything. The whole circuit court, magistrate court that the Chief Justice talked about, all of that is actually contained in 11 lines in the budget. And we had some discussions with the legislature about expanding that a little bit within the budget bill. But one thing that we did was when Justice Jenkins and I joined the court back in the fall, one of the things that we worked with the Chief Justice and the other members of the court to do was to actually go not only line item by line item into those 11 lines, but within the OASIS, and many of you have also probably looked at the OASIS categories of state spending, there's actually 10 pages of lines of specifics as to how that money is spent. And so more than 200, or close to 200, I think, line items of how those 11 lines are broken down. And we went through and sat down with our budget people within the court system, with our administrative director and others, and said, we went line through line of those OASIS accounts and talked about how we could more efficiently spend that money, what could we do where are we budgeted more than we need? Where do we have additional needs that aren't budgeted? We tried to go very detailed into that discussion, and as a result of that, we did make some pretty significant reductions to particular line items of that budget. We also gave our analysis of the OASIS line items to the legislature so that they could see why we came up with the numbers that we had in those 11 lines. And they were very complimentary, as the Chief Justice had said, they were very complimentary of that process and felt like that's something that they hoped other agencies would do. And I think they may be talking to other agencies about, won't speak for them, but my understanding is they'll be perhaps talking to other agencies about doing that type of analysis and giving that. But we gave that to each member of the finance committees as a part of our budget presentation that the Chief Justice did, and they were very pleased that we were giving them that detail. And I would not be surprised in the future to see some additional lines in the budget document itself. I think they would like to see some additional breakdown of those lines. But I don't want to go into the weeds too much on the budget itself, but I did want to point out a couple things. If you look at I don't know if you can, how well you can see those particular lines, but the biggest part of a court's budget is personal services and employee benefits. Of a total of, and this slide is for our previous year budgets, not fiscal year 2020, it's fiscal year 2019. But the personal services and employee benefits were 102 million of the 139 million. So really that, as in most agencies, that is the largest line item, and by far the majority of the money that is spent is to pay for the court system employees. And as the chief has said, there are about 1,500 employees throughout the state, court reporters, probation officers, the entire system throughout each of your counties that is funded through that line item. So that's the biggest line item in our budget. And I will show you in a moment, that is really one of the few areas where we actually increased our budget, and that wasn't from hiring additional people, but we did when the legislature adopted the 5% pay raise for state employees last year, and then an additional 5% this year. That was also placed in our budget so that those hardworking employees throughout the state, the court system, got that same benefit from the legislative action of the 5% raise. So that's one area you will see. But even once we did that, we were able, I'll go from the $139 million budget to our budget that we just completed for the 2020 budget, which is $121 million, $18 million less. And that's roughly a 13% decrease. And I don't know of very many times during my 20 years in the legislature where we saw even an agency come to us with a 13% decrease, particularly not a branch of government. And so we were very pleased that we were able to do that. And by doing that, we really did that through efficiencies. And there's one thing that I do need to point out from that, so that you'll be aware that if next year one particular line does increase, if you look at the line for current expenses, and I'm going to go back to the budget before, the budget in 2019 was $32 million. And I'll talk to you in just a minute about what's included in that current expenses. But in this year's budget, it's $9 million, which is a significant decrease of our budget. I do want to say that the reason that we reached the $9 million, the budget we submitted originally was $19 million in that. So there was a significant decrease in that line item in our court submitted budget. But we worked with the legislature and said we had some additional funding that was remaining from past budget years. Most agencies have some that is left over. We had additional funding, and we said to the legislature, we want to give you back $10 million of this funding. And we worked with the finance chairs. I see Doug Coles in the back, that is one of the members of the, was a majority leader when I was honored to be the speaker, and a member of the finance committee. We worked with the finance committee to say, how do you want us to do that? How do you want us to account for that $10 million in our budget that we're returning to you? And that's what we did. We reduced that $19 million line item they did, the legislature did, working with us, to 9 million so that we could reflect that we're presenting them $10 million basically back. So we're living, so to speak, out of that $10 million in that line item because that line item is reduced. We will be spending more than $9 million in that area because it is a myriad of things that are very important to the court system, but we'll be using $10 million of excess funding from previous years to do that. So we appreciate the legislature's willingness to work with us on that, but as I said, that line item might increase in future years depending on how we go about funding that area. So if anyone sees this in future budgets and says, why did you go up in that line item? I wanted to make very clear that there's really about a $19 million amount that needs to be appropriated to fund that, but we're funding it through $10 million from old revenue. So I want to touch a little bit on what is included in these numbers. And again, I don't want to get into the weeds. I know this isn't a budget hearing, but and we did go very specific with the legislature, and this is all public record. We're very open as to these amounts. But as you can see in this graph, this is going back and using our 2018 numbers, which we presented to the legislature as the justification of why our budget looked as it did when we presented it. The largest amount within the personal services line item is the magistrate courts. And there are 447 employees as of 2018. Again, those numbers these are roughly accurate now, but there are some changes in them. But proportionately, you can see the magistrate court is the largest amount of our budget, then the circuit courts, probation, family court, the administration of the court, and then the Supreme Court, which that includes not only the 5 justices, but the staff of the court, the clerk's office of the court, pretty much the entire staff of our Supreme Court. So those are sort of how those numbers are broken. So the largest amount actually goes throughout the counties of our state, through the magistrate courts, circuit courts, probation, and family courts. That money is being spread throughout all 55 counties, and it's very important when people say they look at the Supreme Court budget, it's not just the Supreme Court's budget, it's the budget of the entire judiciary throughout the state. If you look at, this is another pie graph that looks a little bit into how the amount of the total budget is appropriated. Magistrate courts, circuit courts are roughly almost half of that budget is the actual circuit and magistrate courts throughout the state. Then you have the family courts, probation, and administration of the court. So that's just basically a breakdown to let you know that, again, the vast majority, almost all of this budget, I would say, with a small proportion that is needed to administer the court system through the Supreme Court, goes out to the counties, goes out to these courts throughout the state. And then finally, let me just talk to you a little bit about the fact that we've cut $10 million out of our budget, that we were living under old funds. These are the kind of things that are involved in that line item. The guardians ad litem, the mental hygiene commissioners, all the data processing throughout the state, the phone system, the family court leases. One thing that many people don't know is family courts, in terms of circuit courts, the counties provide them office space and chambers in the courthouses. But the family court system, the actual Supreme Court budget is what funds their office space in the areas in which they operate in each county. So we actually have leases in each of the 55 counties for space for the family courts. And that's a little different than the circuit courts where the counties fund that. So I won't go through all these, but drug testing, jury fees, expenses for trials, all those things are a part of that one line item that, as I said, I'll go back, we reduced down to $9 million, but it's actually more like a $19 million line item. So what we are wanting to do as we go into the 2021 budget year, which will be the first year that we will be under the constitutional amendments, actually, where we're legally required to take these steps that we've already started doing in this year, budget year. As we want to continue to build that process, build that relationship with the legislature to make sure that our budget is responsible, efficient use of the taxpayers' dollars, that we're very open and transparent, that anyone throughout our state can look and see exactly how our money is being spent in the court system, that they can question that you can question it, that you can ask us basically to justify those expenditures. Because we do believe that we have taken steps to ensure that the taxpayers' money is being responsibly spent, that we won't have repeats of some of the things that you've heard about over the last year. And some have said, well, do you still, we don't want to dwell on what's taken place, but we never want to forget what took place, because we need to ensure that it never happens again. And so we're not going to dwell on it. We are moving forward. We are getting our work done as a court. We are working well together, as the chief said. I want to compliment the chief. She's done a tremendous job of leading this court in the right direction in so many ways. Some that she's talked about, many others that we haven't talked about today. But I think our court is moving in the right direction. We know that we're not going to restore confidence overnight. We understand that. And it's up to the people of West Virginia to decide when we have restored that confidence. But I truly believe every single day that we do our work, we do it responsibly, we do it efficiently, we do it in an open manner, is one day closer to getting that confidence back. And we're working very hard each and every day to do that. So that is an overview of, and again, I didn't want to get too much into the weeds about our budget, but I do think it's important that the people of our state understand that when we talk about the Supreme Court budget, we're talking about the entire court system that they deal with each and every day throughout our state, and that we are working every day to find ways to make that work more efficiently. And we have a great staff that works with us to do that. We're already starting. We've had meetings already on our upcoming budget with the different agencies to come in and say, what are your needs? Where can we make reductions? Where are you going to have additional needs? And to go ahead and get a head start on working on our upcoming budget. But with that, I will turn over the mic to, I guess, Justice Hutchinson. You're going to be last. Justice Hutchinson, who will talk a little bit about what types of cases that we're working on, what we are spending our time on. We are up to date on our caseload, which is very important. We finished our term in June for the January term. We're getting ready, already working on the cases for our September term. But Justice Hutchinson will share a little bit about the types of things we're working on and sort of what makes up our caseload.
Push it to the right.
Yeah, the little arrow there.
Oops.
Keep going. No, here. Go.
Going backwards. I'm hitting the right hand button. I'm technologically challenged.
I'll help you.
Thank you, dear. All right. In addition to all the initiatives that we've talked about, or the chief and that Tim have talked about, and Evan will talk about in a little bit, we do have another function, and that's to hear cases. And so we work on that very, very diligently. I know that the graphic is going to be very difficult to read, but what the two most important things are on the right-hand side, which are the circles that talk about 2017, 2018, in terms of the types of cases in general categories that we have, that the court has dealt with, and to take a little bit of a look at where time is being spent. And the biggest one you will look at, you'll note, is the domestic cases, and that would be on the lower right of each of those circles. In 2017, roughly 32% of the cases that the court dealt with were domestic, and most of those were abuse and neglect cases, appeals from circuit courts related to abuse and neglect, decisions made by circuit judges, and a huge number of those appeals were by parents who had lost custody or lost their parental rights to their children. And if you look from 2017 to 2018, there was roughly a 4% increase in that number, and we're seeing a fairly steady increase in that particular category. If I go to the next one, you have to look at it. It's this is just for the spring term, January through June of this year, and the numbers are a little surprising because that domestic category has gone down by about 6%. But I question whether or not it will stay that way once we get into the September term, and we're already starting to schedule those cases. But the major part of what we do is we deal with cases, and if you look, in 2017, 946 appeals, in 2018, 937, and 2018 was the year that we like to forget. Lots of things happened, and especially in the fall term of 2018, lots of things kindly got put not on the back burner, but on the side burner a little bit. And if you look, in 2017, the justices issued 150, in that total year, issued 115 total signed opinions. And those are opinions where the justice actually writes the opinion and deals with the points of law. In 2018, there were 67 signed opinions. And there were 52 in the spring term, and then there were only 10, I think, 10 signed opinions in the September term, which points out I think, in very stark terms, what was going on down at the court and where the focus was. And I'm not saying it was bad, good, bad, or indifferent. It needed to be, the issues needed to be dealt with, and one of the areas that had to take a little bit of a sidestep was dealing with significant opinions. In the spring term, which we have just completed, this term we issued 61 signed opinions already this term. So you can see that there is a substantial uptick in the amount of work that's being done by the justices and their staffs. With regard to our primary focus, which is dealing with cases, and our secondary focus is dealing with the administration of the courts. I have a little, let me see if I can do it again. Am I doing it right?
There you go.
Okay, all right. These, this indicates in the September 2018 term of the court the types of cases and the numbers of cases that you will see that the court had to deal with, and clearly you will look and see that the largest number of cases were abuse and neglect cases, by far and away the largest number of cases. And that translates back to what's going on in the circuits. Our circuit judges are being inundated with abuse and neglect cases, and the filings that result from abuse and neglect of children. And the rules for those are pretty strenuous, and they require specific hearings and specific amounts of time, because a month in the life of a child is like a year and a half or 2 years in the life of an adult. So the idea is to find permanency as quickly as you can, and that is a great problem, and especially when those cases come to the Supreme Court, because we have to deal with them in general the same way that we would a criminal case or another general civil case. We have to make sure that both sides have an appropriate opportunity to brief their cases and have a decision. Now, I'm going to digress just a little bit, and I do it for a specific purpose, but several years ago, the Supreme Court of Appeals of West Virginia went from a discretionary appeals court to a mandatory appeals court. In other words, if somebody appeals a case, they're going to get a written decision one way or the other, and we do not have the time to hear oral arguments on every case that is appealed. So many of the cases, and there's a huge number of cases that are issued and receive memorandum opinions, which do not, in general, establish any new points of law, but it simply resolves the issues that are involved in that case. And a huge number of the abuse and neglect cases are dealt with in that manner. And that really, results in a quicker turnaround, because we can deal with the cases. I'm not saying, and I want to make sure everybody understands, that the fact that we don't hold an oral argument does not mean that we don't review those cases. Every justice reviews every case, and every case gets a vote. And it's determined at the point in time when we're doing our writ process, that whether or not that case is going to get oral argument. But every case is reviewed by every justice, so a decision is made, and the fact that we can issue memo decisions in a great number of these abuse and neglect cases results in a more rapid finalization of that case, so that the kids involved can, at some point in time, reach permanency. It might be permanency with their parents, going back to their parents, or it might be permanency outside. And from having been on the circuit bench for 23 years, I can tell you that one of the greatest problems circuit judges have is finding permanency, because we don't have enough adoptive homes, we don't have enough appropriate foster care placements, and we don't have enough people willing to take on guardianships. So it's a real test, but one of the things that we need to make sure that we do up at the Supreme Court is we don't slow that process down. And so that's why we use memorandum opinions a lot in these types of cases. So the next thing, and I want to talk just very briefly about another topic that deals with cases, but it doesn't deal with the types of cases, and that's our Court Plus e-filing program. The court is attempting to establish in all the circuits in the state, all the counties in the state, in the circuit clerk's offices, a case management and e-filing process. We've got it in 20 counties right now. It has not been without hiccups. I will tell you that we've got a list of 100 problems that we're trying to, an executive oversight committee is trying to deal with. But we're trying to reduce those problems as quickly as we can, dealing with the software folks that have the program. But we're trying to get that. I'll give you an example. The mass litigation panel, and I was on the mass litigation panel since 1997 until I came on the bench. And in 2008, we started using an electronic filing system for just mass litigation cases, none other, just the mass litigation cases. And in 2018, 815,000 pages of documents were electronically filed through the electronic filing process. That was just mass litigation. From the time that we began, it's estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 million pages of documents were filed. Now, those are also served on all the people that need to get them. Those are served electronically, so you save all that paper as well. And that's one of the reasons that we're trying to get the electronic filing system in place in the state of West Virginia. Counties are drowning in paper, and they don't have places to keep the paper. But in addition to that, having that type of program makes those cases and those documents far more readily available to lawyers, judges, and everybody else that need to get to them. And so that's what we're doing. Am I over my time?
No, you're fine.
All good.
You have one more slide?
I do?
You want to talk about that one? That was just January 19th.
That's just what we're looking at. We just finished. If you'll look again, I had that one up there for the same purpose, to show you that of all the types of cases that we deal with, Abuse and neglect is by far the largest one. And so, I'm done.
Fantastic. Are you going down?
I am.
Okay, so I will give you the mic. Unless you have one down there. This is Justice Evan Jenkins.
Great, thank you. You want to take that and give it to somebody?
No, I think so. I
Oh,
think they're gonna-
we gotta keep it, okay.
Well, good morning. My name is Evan Jenkins, and I have the honor of serving on our state Supreme Court with these other great folks and Justice Workman as well. My role here is to kind of back clean up. You are in the information business, and as you've heard from certainly the chief and all of us, it's about accountability, it's about transparency, it's about getting the word out. I'll be candid, I was not a great student of the Supreme Court's website until about a year ago. And I was amazed at the amount of information that is readily available on our website. And what I wanted to do is take just a couple of minutes here to walk you through the website. Sorry, it's a little sketchy on, can't get the focus a little better. Not much. What I'd like to do is, again, walk through the website and share with you some of the key bits of information, one-stop shop for you. If you've not visited our website, please do so. But we're also engaged in social media as well, and I'll make reference to that. Let me first maybe point out the most important person in this room, and that's Jennifer Bundy. Jennifer, right here, keeps us on track. She heads up our comms effort. We appreciate the good work that Jennifer does. Her right-hand lady is April, and between the dynamic duo, they are there to serve you and your questions, serve the public. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to Jennifer or April with questions. If you need help with tracking a case and where it is, and are there critical dates coming up, if there's something from your region that you know is an important issue percolating in the court, do not hesitate to reach out. Obviously, she can't make comments about the pending litigation, nor any of us connected with the court, but she is an invaluable resource. So here's our homepage for the Supreme Court. A couple of things to look. At the top right, there's actually a search by county. It's up here. This is a good way to basically look. Let's just go to Boone County. I hope I may have. Let's look at Boone County. And by your particular county, you could go in, select from the drop-down menu the county, and what this will do, and again, sorry for the fuzziness, this will give you all of the circuit court, the judge or judges from that court, from that circuit. It will also give you the family court, the magistrate court, phone numbers, contact information, one-stop shop. So if you're curious about who the judges are in a particular county, or family court judges, who the magistrates, this is where you can find that very, very easily. Next, what I want to do is look at this where you see Supreme Court opinions. That actually cycles through. There's four little rotating bits of information there, two of which are most important, I think, to you. The court forms, probably not quite as important. But from this tab, you can see the court docket for the year. And also, this is a one-stop shop for all the opinions that have been issued by the court for this particular term. So let's go through and hit court calendar. Very easy to access, one-stop shop, and let's just simply go to September. This is organized by month. And by selecting September, this is, of course, when we go back on the bench beginning, I think, the second Wednesday or so in September for the fall term. This is organized by calendar date. And you can see here that on the top right, 9-4 arguments. This is the first day we're back on the bench. And you can actually go and look at the argument docket for that day. And we have, I think, 7 cases that we are going to hear oral arguments on. So you know, anybody in the public knows that on September 4th, we are back on the bench. We start at 10 o'clock, and here are the 7 cases that we will be hearing that day. Not only are we telling you what cases we are going to hear that day, we have sublinks, as you see under the first one. We have the actual petitions and the response filings from the parties. So you can get the court documents for that particular case that we're going to be hearing on September 4th. Lots of good information, and you can see the lawyers. You can reach out to the lawyers if you want to have a question about a case coming up. That is there for information. So that's a little bit about that tab that I mentioned that is the court docket. The second in this area is relating to the opinions. Here is a section of the website that we list all of the opinions that are issued. Now, Justice Hutchinson talked about signed opinions. Thus far this year, we have issued 61 signed opinions. These are the more significant cases. These are cases generally that we have heard in oral arguments before the bench. Memorandum decisions, the other types of decisions. And there's essentially 3 things that populate this: the signed opinions, the memorandum decisions, and also what we call separate opinions. That may be a dissent or it may be a concurrence. But this is done chronologically. The most recent opinions or memorandum decisions or separate opinions that have been issued are at the top of the list. And you could go through all decisions for this term of the court listed there. There's hyperlinks here, so you can go to the actual opinion from the court, and there's information about how to read a court opinion. But this, again, one-stop shop. You can see what the results of the cases that we have decided. Generally, our policy is that signed opinions are issued at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock each day. Now, not every day, obviously, a signed opinion is released, but the major decisions, the signed opinions, are issued and posted at 3 o'clock. Memorandum decisions aren't quite structured in terms of timely when they are ready and are filed, whether that be at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock. They will populate the website with those filings at that point. So those are the 2 areas that I wanted to mention. So first, we talked about the counties up at the top right. You can pull down. The second, there in the scrolling, you can look at the calendar and you can look at opinions. Now you see that we've got 5 categories, and first is public resources, then Supreme Court, lower courts, legal community, and court administration. And there's a number of subpages under each of those. Let me simply highlight some of the information that I think, again, the public would be most interested and engaged with under these categories. Under the first, the public information, very important, the third link down is called news and publications. This is primarily Jennifer and April's area of responsibility in not only managing the website, but this is where good public resources are most readily available. If there's a press release out, if there's something of significance, this is where that we will post it. We also have, in addition to latest news, we have media contact information. So if folks want to reach out to the court, this is where they can do so. So this is a good place to visit under news and publication. Of particular note, all of the press releases for the Supreme Court dating back to 1999 are actually on our website. So this isn't just the latest term of the court. We have a great archive of all the press releases dating back almost 20 years are available there. There's lots of resources, and the chief made mention of it. We have embedded in here our videos. These are links to the YouTube page. So this was under the public information. This was domestic violence, and here is the video related to our efforts to get the word out in terms of the domestic violence protective order process. Very helpful. So that's under public resources. Under Supreme Court, the second category, we have the justices' profiles, we have the clerk's office, and if you're wondering where we can find that great information that Justice Hutchison just talked about, here under statistics is that exact chart, and we have this going back year by year for a number of years. So this is out there available to the public. It shows our case trends. People are always amazed at the fact that many of us came along 20 years ago when it was all about workers' comp cases. Well, now it's all about abuse and neglect cases in terms of the lion's share. What a change that has happened in terms of the workload of the Supreme Court. Under lower courts, you can go through court by court. Here also, in addition to what Justice Hutchison talked about, you can actually get the caseload broken down by county. So for our friends up at the Intelligencer, if you want to know the case filings in Ohio County, for magistrate court, for circuit court, for family court, we have the statistics broken down, not just statewide in aggregate, but by county. You would be very interested, I think, to see the case trends in your particular county. Some really fascinating data. As the old saying, you can only manage what you measure. We are very much in the measuring business, and we are doing the best to try to manage the information to make sure that it is accessible to you. Under legal community, a lot of important information there. Of particular note, probably something you don't hit very often, but is something that is very important to us, and that is the JIC, the Judicial Investigation Commission. The JIC does important work. Terry Tarr is the head staff lead of that organization. What is under the JIC is advisory opinions. And all of the opinions from the JIC by category, and again, apologies for the lack of clarity, but let me give you a flavor for some of the JIC advisory opinions in the subject matters. Media, money, free speech, gifts, practice of law, rental property, attendance. There are broad categories, and under each of these categories is a series, whether it be 1 or 20, advisory opinions of what judges and magistrates and justices can and cannot do. Ethics is important. Ethics matters. Now, Justice Hutchison always gets nervous when I bring this up. Thank goodness for the Judicial Investigation Commission, because there was a judge from Raleigh County who had been asked whether or not he would participate in Dancing with the Stars as a contestant. So Justice Hutchison did the right thing and reached out to the JIC and said, I've been asked about participating in Dancing with the Stars. And they said, no.
Boy, was
I
that
am
nice.
so happy about this result. So all of us, you will never see us participating in Dancing with the Stars, fundraiser in your local community. But if you take a step back and realize the last thing we want is to have fundraising activities where a judge or a justice is participating and the promoters are trying to generate money based on our volunteering for a particular capacity. So under this tab, you have the ability to go through and look at all the categories. Let me give you another example. 2 judges running for office at the same time, different seats, are not allowed to ride together in a car when they were going out to do door knocking, albeit in separate neighborhoods. They weren't going together to knock doors and campaign. But the JIC said you are not even allowed to ride in the same car to that community to start your door knocking because of the appearance that you are endorsing one another or supporting one another. So some fun examples, whether it be ride-alongs or Dancing with the Stars, this is important to us. And it's exactly what the chief talks about, is restoring public trust and honesty, transparency, and integrity. And so I've probably spent more time than necessary, but right there for your and the public's awareness is easy access to all the opinions about what judges and justices are allowed to do and not do. So I'm probably overstayed my allotted time. There's a lot of information I'm scanning through here to see.
Justice Jenkins, show them
Yes.
where our court policies are. They're under the 5th tab over, I think.
Yep. Under the administrative, let's see. They're under administrative office? Yeah.
No, there's a separate policies tab. There's a-
Judicial policies, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. As Chief Justice Walker mentioned, I tell you, we have been very busy under her leadership. Again, there's nothing like what we've been through to identify areas of improvement and what's needed. So anybody in the world can go to our website and see actually our policies. Travel policies and standards, number 1. Purchasing card policies and procedures, number 2. General accounting policies and procedures. Asset management policies and procedures. Procurement policies and procedures. So it's out there, they're detailed, and they are available for you or anyone to see exactly what the rules we have agreed to live by and to be held accountable to. Any other aspects of the website, Jennifer? Under the Supreme Court and for Circuit Court, you can go in and see the complete bios, contact information, pictures, so in your community or for the Supreme Court.
Evan, there may be just the link to get to the, when we have oral arguments, if they want to watch them. I think that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's only up whenever
Yeah.
we're.
If you
Wallace
go,
is on there too.
yeah. As you can see, everybody's following the website, and we all have our special aspect. So again, there's several ways to get there, but I went back to that, the calendar and the docket. Right down here is the argument webcast, and there's a tab, very big, argument webcast. Click here, and this will take you, again, very important. You cannot sit at home and watch the United States Supreme Court in action. You can sit at home and watch video, live video streaming of the oral arguments. I remember a number of years ago, there was I guess a telephone number, and that was the best you could do, is you could listen in on the oral argument. Now you can not only hear the oral argument, you can watch the oral argument. All of our oral arguments our broadcast by video cam. Jennifer reminded me, in addition to our social media, down at the bottom of our website, there is a Flickr link. So as we go out and do events, Justice Hutchison, Justice Armstead, Chief Justice Walker have been very busy, as all of us have been going out to community groups, to schools, to Rotary lunches, you name it, we're out there. And if there's pictures from those events, or we have particular key events such as bar admission ceremony at the Supreme Court, Jennifer and April populate the Flickr, so you've got easy access to great digital content if you want to do something from, let's say, a drug court graduation. Pictures from that event are there available to it. So I'm not going to even ask them again if they've got more. They've got thank you very much. Bottom line, I know I'm the wrap up and we're available for questions. The chief could not have stated it better, and Justice Hutchison and Armstead, we are all in this together. We all like each other, all 5 justices. We may have disagreements, obviously, on decisions, but the bottom line is you've got a group of justices on our Supreme Court that understand we have a lot of work ahead of us. I hope you can appreciate the fact that we are in the weeds, whether it be the case filings or the policies or the financials. We are hands-on and we are in this together. We are working together because we know for a civil society, having a judiciary that is fair, that is independent, that is accountable is absolutely essential. And we're all committed to achieving exactly what we know every West Virginian deserves. So thank you for this opportunity.
Justice Jenkins.
Thank you so much, and the justices have been kind enough to say they'll try to take some questions if we can. One of the things, and Mike Meyer, I know I'll ask you and some of the others who have been at this for a long time, and 35 years, and a lot of that spent covering federal and circuit courts in the Northern District. I can say, and John, please, you too, I have never gotten more new information than I have today. I am not a newbie at this. I've been through the court system and reported on this, and I can honestly say not just here but anywhere I've never gotten more new information, more useful than I have at this. So for that, I want to say thank you. Would John, Mike, you guys in agreement with that? Has this been good? Good, because it's one thing if you're here and it's new to you and you don't have a point of view, but I've been doing it for longer than I want to admit, and I'm greatly impressed. We know we're going to take some questions, and Steve, I'll be right with you. I'm going to set the stage. I'll probably ask a question that can't be answered, so I want to see where we go. It's not always clear to journalists that we can't ask everything, but we understand there are rules to what you can comment on. So bear with us as we try to do this. And I will ask this question based on the comments that came. Justice Hutchinson and I think Justice Armstead both talked, as well as the Chief Justice, about the caseload and the abuse and neglect. And Delegate Darrell Cowles was here, and we spoke last night with the legislature, and the delegate pointed out that there was a real need for corrections officers around the state. Now, I know that doesn't deal with you, but this question is related. The abuse and neglect cases, the delegate pointed out that one of the problems in the system, in the correction system, and I wonder if it applies in the court system, if you can answer the question, is the opioid problem something you're seeing more of in the abuse and neglect? Is that a question that you can answer? Okay, very good.
Let me start and then I'll let anybody else who wishes to chime in. We haven't been able to put an exact number on it, and we're working on that, but we know that I would say the majority of the abuse and neglect cases involve some kind of substance abuse disorder, whether it's opioids or alcohol. I've really tried to get our folks to give me numbers because I know they're really high and I'd love to be more specific. But that's absolutely what we're dealing with. And we were actually talking about this amongst ourselves. You know, the legislative and executive branches have certainly and appropriately stepped forward and funded treatment and talked about policy changes that need to be made in the state. But we are dealing with the opioid crisis every day in the courts. And we probably haven't talked about it enough. You know, it's our abuse and neglect cases, it's the criminal cases that result from, you know, behaviors, whether it's stealing for money to get drugs or violating, you know, the drug laws themselves, whatever it may be. We are dealing with it day to day, and I think all of us are committed to just trying to have more of a voice. This foster care crisis, you know, it's certainly within the, you know, under the auspices of the DHHR to deal with, but our judges are the ones who are trying to place these children in appropriate homes and possibly in permanent homes. And, you know, they're running out of parental placements, or family kinship placements, they call them. So we're dealing with it on a lot of different levels. So it's a great question and has absolutely had a huge impact on the courts. And even as we start, you know, we've seen opioid deaths are dropping, fortunately. But I still think we're going to be dealing with these issues in the courts for a long time. So I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
There's another area, and having served on the circuit bench for as long as I did, I can tell you anecdotally, I don't have the numbers, but anecdotally, my opinion is that of the cases I dealt with, probably 85 to 90% of the cases had a drug component. I'm not saying that drugs caused the initial issue, but the drugs were there. But we also, in the administration of the court system in the state of West Virginia, deal with probation. And a large part of, you know, we're being confronted with certain challenges, and one of those challenges is medically assisted treatment programs. We have drug courts, both juvenile and adult drug courts, and as the chief mentioned, we're establishing family treatment courts in the hopefully in the fall. But one of the things that has come up, and historically judges wanted people off of drugs, and they did not want people substituting medically, sometimes medically appropriate substitutes like methadone or Suboxone or something like that. They want everybody off. Well, now the federal government has recognized that medically assisted treatment programs are in fact appropriate, and sometimes maybe if you tell them that they can't be on that sort of thing, you may be violating ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act issues. So all of that flows across, and all of that is what we're trying to deal with as a court.
I'll just very quickly add to what Justice Hutchins has said. The Family Treatment Court, I think, is a good opportunity for us to try some new things. We have new federal law, the Family First Act, that gives some options to use funding that wasn't previously able to be used to try to keep families together when that's appropriate. And we understand there are times where that's not going to be appropriate, where the children need to be removed from the home, but there's also there hasn't been as much funding available and maybe not as many opportunities through the court system to try to see if families can be kept together in those situations where the parents can seek treatment and reestablish themselves as fit parents to keep their children in the home. So that's one of the things that I think the Family Treatment Court is going to be focused on, as well as some of the Family First funding that's coming from the federal government. And we're working with DHHR, with the legislature, with all involved to try to make sure we make the best use of that new funding, and of the new Family Treatment Court to be able to address this. But it's, as everyone has said, we deal with it in every day in cases that we have pretty much, and it's a huge part of what we do as a court. And we want to be a partner in trying to ensure that we do all we can to get these children in the right places, where they have the opportunities they need and to address it as a partner with all the other branches of government.
Yes, Don, the answer is yes. Just a couple of additional comments. Could not agree more with Justice Hutchison and the MAT issue and what the Chief and Tim suggest. Let me also suggest, I think a recognition from the Supreme Court is that when you think of all the touch points in a person's life, very often it's that judge. It's going to be the judge that in an abuse and neglect case is going to decide whether or not that child stays with the biological mother or father. It's going to be a judge that's deciding whether or not somebody who's fallen off the wagon during probation is sent back to jail. Somebody who's participating in a family court or at the drug court, juvenile drug court. So my point is that judges, the magistrates, family court judges are all critical in the lives of the people that come before the court. And usually this disease of addiction ends up in one form or fashion engaging in the judicial system. So what we're trying to do is, while I guess tragically because of the opioid crisis in West Virginia that's been around longer than in some other states, we've had a lot of experience. We also recognize that we need to be giving our folks on the front line, probation officers and the judges and the magistrates, the tools and resources to better understand, to better cope with. We always know in the abuse and neglect area that through court opinion that the polar star is what's in the best interest of the child. And that is a good polar star to have, and that's the challenge with the disease of addiction. And you're dealing with people, some more driven by trying to get their life in order than others, trying to make judgment cases, but always thinking about the kids.
Thank you very much. Stephen, I'll be right, bring the mic to you. Stephen, I didn't mind this. Oh, sure.
Steve Adams with the Parkersburg News and the Wheeling Intelligencer. This is questions probably for Chief Justice, and it's sort of the elephant in the room, but this is August 2019, and we're just about a year out from the impeachment saga. You were a new justice at that time. Now you're one of two senior justices, along with Justice Margaret Workman. Several of you were impeached. You're the only one actually went through the actual impeachment trial process and came out of it all right, though you did have a censure. And then it came to you after a vote to become Chief Justice, so it kind of got put in your lap to fix all of this. So I guess my question to you is, you've talked about some of the issues that you all have done to improve the court, and I think there's no argument there that those things have been wonderful. But just from a personal perspective, again, this all got thrown in your lap. Like, what do you, a year out from impeachment, like, what are your thoughts? Having gone through it, do you feel the court has come out of it stronger? I'd say it probably has, but you might have an opinion on that. Could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Is that something you can address?
Sure.
Okay, very good.
So the way that of course, I was very public in the impeachment trial, and I took responsibility for everything, however limited it may have been, that I had done. I learned a lot from that process, and it was tremendously difficult. It was very political. I'm new on the court, and all of a sudden things are blowing up. So, but going through a process like that, I guess, has been a wonderful experience in that I learned a lot quickly. And I have had, with my colleagues, an opportunity to make a tremendous difference in a relatively short period of time. There were some things that needed to be fixed, a culture that was broken, frankly, in my opinion, at the court. And I was given, it was actually about a month after my acquittal in the Senate that I was elected chief for the following year. You know, that's a West Virginia story if there ever was one. But it's been a tremendous opportunity to change. I mean, because you can say, well, we've got to do all these things, but when you have 5 people who serve 12-year terms, they get kind of, stuck or set at where they were. We had 3 new people right away who with all kinds of ideas and all kinds of willingness to look at new ways of doing things. I mean, look at the talent that came to the court just within the last year. We have a circuit judge serving more than 20 years. He has been, we have someone in the room, in our conference room, who has tried cases, who has done these abuse and neglect cases, and is incredibly helpful on a day-to-day basis in what the concerns are out in the circuits. We have our former congressman, longtime state senator, who comes to us with all of that experience, having been in judiciary, worked in the medical community, and then we have, of course, a former speaker. We have 2 folks sitting here on my right with incredible knowledge about the state budget process, and I didn't know about the state budget process, and all of a sudden I was elected chief and I was going to be testifying under oath as to our budget. These 2 guys were invaluable in preparing the budget, in doing everything we needed to do, and really identifying what legislators wanted to know. You know, sometimes you can sit back as a lawyer and you start talking lawyer and you think, or you start talking judge, you're not talking about what people really want to hear. And all 3 of our new justices were incredibly useful in being able to say, this is what people want to hear. This is what circuit judges are concerned about. This is what legislators are concerned about. These are what the voters are concerned about. So I guess I was presented a horrible situation that has turned into the best thing ever. I have the best job in the state as far as I'm concerned. I'm extremely fortunate to be sitting where I am, and you can be sure that every day I am grateful for the opportunity to have continued in this role.
Thank you.
Okay, first hand was in the back, but the first person I'm coming to is Dave. So I'm going to get Dave.
David Hedges from Spencer Newspapers. The court records in magistrate court have been computerized for a few years now, but yet some public records are not available on the public terminals. Chief among those is our criminal complaints. Oddly enough, in cases that are transferred to circuit court, you can go in the circuit court system and read the criminal complaint. You cannot on the magistrate court system. You have to, yet they are scanned in, the staff is scanning them in. You have to go to a court staffer and ask them to print you a copy of the complaint or ask for the paper file. I don't understand why these public records, which are already scanned in the system, are not available on the public terminal. And I also don't understand why these public records are only available through a public terminal at the magistrate court. Why aren't they available on my computer in my office or my home or a computer in Hong Kong for that matter?
Oops.
Or you can do it.
You've got 2 different systems, and the magistrate system is an older system, and it was designed not to be as inclusive. Now, whether we can fix that or not, I don't know. The same question right now exists with what we're doing with the Court Plus and e-filing system, because you can't get to those records right now because we, quite frankly, we're at a little bit of a loggerhead with the treasurer's office about how do we do what's called a subscription service, where you would be able to use your private terminal in your office to be able to access certain records, not all records, but certain records. The problem is there's going to be a cost for that, and the question is, do we have to collect the subscription fee, or does the software provider collect the subscription fee and pay us? And we're in a little bit of an argument with the treasurer's office right now over how that's going to happen. Whether or not there is the ability to have a subscription service in the magistrate court system, I don't know. And I, quite frankly, have not had the opportunity to be involved as directly in that system as I have been in the Court Plus e-filing system. So, I don't know that, I mean, the fact that you're able to get the records at all through, in the magistrate court is, I think, should be considered a positive thing, based upon how the records have been kept in the past.
And one of the things that's challenging, and this is not an excuse, although it might sound like it, is, you know, you think, okay, we're just gonna put all of our records on a computer system or a web-based system and just put them out there. Well, there's a lot of layers of security concerns and all of that, like the records having to do with juveniles, or the abuse and neglect case, you know, which are confidential records. And so, I can tell you that we are personally committed to making things accessible as possible, but for example, that magistrate court system has been in place for a while. It probably needs to be upgraded to a web-based system so that people can, like our Court Plus, we'll get there, but we're just not there yet. And I will tell you I'll work on it.
I'd be happy if we could just view the criminal complaints on the magistrate's public terminal.
I'll go back and ask about that. It seems a little, I mean, if you get everything else and not the complaints, but I'm happy to do that.
Save time, our next question is coming from Mike Meyer from the Intelligencer and News Register.
Thank you. You all probably, of all the top-level officials in state government, you probably see the pain of the drug abuse epidemic more than anybody else. I'd like for you to comment on our approach to battling it. It's not just a shotgun approach, it's a bunch of shotgun approaches. Everybody has some program or initiative to battle the drug abuse epidemic. Is it coordinated enough? Are we using our limited resources as efficiently as possible? Do we need to all get together in a room and say, why are we both doing initiative A? Talk a little bit about the coordination of the efforts to battle drug abuse.
And I'll ask, again, is that a question you feel you can answer? Very good.
Talk a little bit about. Sure. One thing that Justice Armstead mentioned that I think is really important is this Family First legislation. Justice Jenkins is very familiar with it. He was in Congress when it was passed. But it is necessitating a better collaboration between the courts and the executive branch. It's going to take a lot of work, and we're committed to coordinating that work with DHHR. You know, the very essence of the Family First initiative is some preventative to try to sort of not just deal with the folks who are addicted, but to try to prevent that from happening along the way, or prevent that from getting as severe as it has gotten. And so I think there can always be more collaboration. You know, historically the judiciary is kind of, and it's easy to understand why it happened. We have to be independent. We have to, you know, we're a separate, co-equal branch of government. But now more than ever, I think we're talking to the other branches, and I think we need to. Is it as efficient as it could be? I don't know, but I know that we're working really hard on it. Anybody else, you guys want to comment?
Just briefly, you know, and kind of looking back at my time in the legislature and how this was approached, I mean, it seemed there was sort of three different goals, I guess. One is the prevention in the first place, trying to get to the young people and do what we can to ensure that they understand the risks involved and that they understand that, you know, what they need to understand to never get addicted in the first place, to the extent we can do that. And obviously, that's a challenge with so many times in families and situations where there's already addiction in the home. Second is to stop the drug trafficking and the influx of the drugs into the state. And then the third aspect of it is dealing with people who are addicted and giving them the help they need to be able to free themselves from this addiction. So I think all three of those are and as you said, there are myriad of opinions of how to deal with each of those issues, but those seem to be from our approach, from the legislative approach and from the court's approach, there's three different aspects there. And there does need to be, as much as there can be, coordination to ensure that people are moving in the same direction in those areas. And, we deal with each of those. We deal more probably with the situations of the addiction that's already there, more than the prevention. But I do think that we all need to work together in all those areas where we can. And I'm pleased that I do think there's a good dialogue open with us in the legislature, not only on those issues, but a number of different issues that I hope will be unprecedented in terms of our state. And that we'll look back on this and see that we really did work together, try to do what we can to listen to each other, to listen to the different ideas that are out there and try to work together to solve it. But there's no, single solution, obviously. And I think people are beginning to realize that trying to get to a single solution isn't probably going to get there. But there are so many different ways to approach it that we can work together on, and I hope we continue to do that.
Mike, I know everyone in this room, we've just been overwhelmed over the last 10, 15 years. And with each year passing and the statistics getting worse and worse, we know this is the most challenging public health and safety issue of our time. A couple of kind of thoughts on my part, and I kind of like how Tim breaks it down into categories. In my category, number one, we have got to stop new addictions moving forward. And that's going to have to be some sort of a pain management that does not trigger that morphine molecule, and that we manage pain in such a way that it does not create these addictive natures. So that's going to be health. That's going to be medicine. Is going to have to stop this trend. Number two, the challenges of those dealing with the disease of addiction, how to handle that. And we know there are just so many different approaches, and nothing has proven itself even remotely significantly effective. We often now are battling between an approach that's 10% effective versus 20% effective. We're not even close to anything being 60, 70, 80% effective in those being able to battle their disease of addiction. So category two is somehow, again, it may be some sort of a medication, obviously lots of unique aspects of stimulating that section of the brain to reduce the cravings and desires. And three, making sure that, as Tim suggests, we don't have a population that is on the front end being exposed and thus addicted. I feel your pain, Mike, because I can tell you in the congressional capacity and the legislative capacity, with meeting after meeting, somebody with a very good idea saying, if for $5,000 or $50,000 or $50 million, look at what I can do. And an hour later, it would be another group of well-intentioned, passionate advocates saying, I need $50,000, $500,000, or $50 million for a different approach. So to your question, policymakers have just a constant flow of people saying, invest in my area. So to the extent there is coordination, and some communities are doing better than others, everybody recognizes the need, but fundamentally, Mike, everybody has a passion for their silo of what they think is most effective. And that may be just simply moving from 10% to 20% of curbing recidivism. But the bottom line is there's not been a silver bullet. There are a lot of champions for the causes. God bless them. You're well aware that I helped start Lily's Place in Huntington. We've got national recognition as a model of care, and I historically fought tooth and nail for funding for making sure that every child gets a healthy start in life. No child should be born having to suffer through the ravages of withdrawal in their first days and weeks in life. To sit there and hold a newborn baby tremoring from drug withdrawal from the exposure, it's what a hell of a way to start life. So, I guess I'm victim to, like so many others, work tooth and nail for an aspect, but this is so multifaceted, and there always can be more coordination. But I think medicine is going to play a key role, hopefully, in addressing how we treat pain and doing it in such a way that does not lead to addiction.
Well, I wish we could take another question, particularly because we didn't, as a room full of journalists, didn't come up with a question they weren't allowed to answer. I'm a little disappointed. I'm a little disappointed with that. That being said, it's clear that this court is accessible, and if you have questions, Jennifer Bundy is here to help. You can reach out. We also, I know you have very busy schedules. At 12 o'clock, our next event is our Hall of Fame luncheon, and all the justices are invited to attend if you would like, but we certainly understand you have other commitments. With that, can we have a round of applause for our justices? I think this has been outstanding. We've had a lot of panels and done a lot, and I can't, this is right at the top of any of them, so we greatly appreciate you being here. Again, this will conclude our session on today's court. We thank the justices so much for being here, and our next event is the Hall of Fame luncheon at noon in Reflections Ballroom. We'll see you all there. Thank you so much.